Well, folks, welcome to the show. This is Scotty Roberts. It's Tuesday, the 23rd of February in the year of, I was going to say your Lord and mine, but I don't know who your Lord is. 2021 AD. And I want to welcome you to the program. We generally are broadcasting on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Go over and see all the goodness. It's Odyssey Radio. But as I just said, generally broadcasting, because as most of the regular listeners know, this show is in temporary makeshift digs with makeshift software, and we're not broadcasting over there quite yet. But it's coming, folks. It's coming. And so I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you are watching the show tonight. And anybody who happens to pick this up in any other way, the YouTube channel is youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And you can come on over, hit the join button below if you haven't already. See 3 ways to join this channel. And if you like to listen and you're just out there kind of lurking and you want to help support the show, you can do it for $2 a month, $5 a month, or go all out and grandiose like you're a rockin' millionaire at $15 a month. And you can look at the perks that you'll get for doing that. So Steve Clark says, I look like I'm feeling better. I am. Last night I was very tired, and I was very tired out. I don't know what that is. Lately, I get a lot of tired out in the daytime. I wake up tired sometimes. I think it's either my sleep habits or it's or what it is. But doesn't matter if I go to bed and I get an 8 or 9 hour night of sleep. Maybe I sleep too much. So there is that. So welcome to everybody. I'm glad to see you here, Steve Clark. Thank you, by the way, and it's good to see you here. And Morgan Snow, nice to see you. Michelle Cunham Free, it's good to see you. Every time we say that and I think of that, my son is out watching the movie that I think of. He's out there watching Braveheart right now, and freedom. So I always think of you that way. So what's good, Roberts? I don't know what you're looking for, McFree. So we'll find out maybe throughout the course of the show. The weather does it to you, says Steve Clark. Might be. Now it's been nice here down in Lake Charles, Louisiana, as Doug Stack can attest. We were at mid 70s today, or 72, 73, and not a cloud in the sky, I must add. So it was a gorgeous day. It was nice to be outside. It was nice to be roaming some neighborhoods outside. We went, you know what I do? We pull up to neighborhoods that have a lot of blue tarp on the roofs. We just go from house to house. And so we get out in the sun, and it's nice to do that when it's not 20 degrees outside and icy. So it was 65 in Social today, says Scott Lowry. And Barbie D, good to see you. Hey to you. Hey yourself. You know, whenever I say hey to somebody, I always think of that line from To Kill a Mockingbird. And she works up the courage. Scout works up the courage as they pass Mrs. Dubois' house every day. She's a crotchety old lady who sits on her porch. And she turns and she says to Mrs. Dubois, she stops, and her brother was disapproving. Don't. And she says, hey, Mrs. Dubois. And Mrs. Dubois answers, don't you say hey to me, you ugly little girl. And of course, they made friends. So, and by the way, Barbie D, I'm not calling you an ugly little girl. It just brought the line to mind from the book. Every time I say hey to somebody, and Scott Lowry, good to see you. Matt Finn, Master Finn, good to see you, brother. And Beth Kirkham, I'm getting a tan, says Beth Kirkham. Well, I got enough sun roaming around today. So, maybe between yesterday and today, little bit of color. And we'll see what happens. I have no bikini lines yet, though. Strange that. So, how's everybody's day? What are you doing? What's going on? Matthew Sainsbury, good to see you, brother. Matthew, this is just temporary studio. I miss it too. It's not my home studio, but we'll either get this one doctored up soon enough. I have the best laid plans of mice and men. I keep saying I'm going to go get something to hang back here or adorn it with something. I don't have any of my cool junk here. I don't have my swords or my statues or my flags or anything like that. But, and this is just a bland wall behind it. This is actually a curtain. This thing right here, that's a curtain covering the window. So, and it's dark outside, so it would look basically the same except for the reflection. So, great day. Smoked a little green stuff today. Oops, says Doug. Doug, that was no oops. You wanted us all to know. And so, what else is going on? Was watching Midnight Diner, Tokyo Stories. I don't even know what that is. Beth, I have no idea. So maybe it's something I should check out, huh? What do you think of it? And let's see, am I missing anybody who's already here? Field Guy. Looks like Field Guy was here way back. So if you're still sitting out there, Field Guy, good to have you. And what else have we got? When Michelle Cannon-Free calls me by my last name, Roberts, I think we're like in a gang or something. Yo, Roberts. So there you go. So let's move on. Today, I want to hit a little bit of paranormal stuff today. Now, I used to do solely a paranormal show. If you didn't know that, years ago. I mean, we're talking 2009, 2008, 2009. And I had agreed to do the paranormal show with it was Dark Plains Radio back then. Amongst the first of the little paranormal online type of radio broadcasts and stations, network. And so I said I would do one if I could also do political talk. I know that's hard for you to believe, but yeah, I want to do political talk. And so I would do a show that was the first hour. I did 2 hour show. First hour was political. Second hour was always a paranormal guest or a paranormal topic. And I had guests ranging from, of course, I had Grant Wilson from Ghost Hunters. I mean, we're talking back in 2009 now, 2010. Grant Wilson. I had Amy Bruni because, well, I got to hang with those people the next year when I became the editor in chief of the magazine. And so I was able to interview all of them because I got to know them very well. And so I had all the people from Chris Williams, if you remember her. I've had some of the Barry Fitzgerald from Ghost Hunters International, Irishman. And and Barry and I got along really well and famously. Now we haven't talked for a couple of years. No reason, just just doing different things and busy. But if you don't know this, it was Barry Fitzgerald wrote a new foreword for the new color edition of The Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare, which came out now. God, that was, I want to say it was 4 years ago when the color edition came out, and Barry wrote the foreword for that. So you might want to pick that up just to see that if you're a big Barry Fitzgerald fan. And I've never even talked about this before, but if you go to my website, or you just go to Tam O'Hare, TAMOHARE, TamO'Hare.com, and you will see how to get that book, the latest color edition. There was an ad in there, and I didn't even plan that one. So I want to do some paranormal talk radio tonight, and I don't have a guest for us, but something here. I was taking a look at, of all places, I didn't want to just do for tonight the typical let's tell a ghost story because I can do that. There's tons of ghost stories online, and everybody does that. It's kind of a fail safe for paranormalists. Oh, we're going to talk ghost stories. And I can give you some pretty hair raising personal accounts and ghost stories. Some of them might seem like they were little things that you got a blip of, but it's actually a big thing. It's a big story. Hey, MSC, good to see you. Sarah Nichols Media, good to see you as well. And let me do this. I want to recap a little story before I go into some of the scientific stuff. The scientific, it's where I'm finding a lot of stuff is looking at live science and places like that and trying to see what they had to say about the paranormal. What does psychology today have to say about the paranormal? Things like that. I want to get a little different take on things. And maybe we'll spend a few days on this week. We'll see how it goes. But so you start looking at um, the scientific side of the paranormal. Scientific side isn't as far removed from it as you might think, but there is definitely a more. I think in scientific circles, you're going to get a more skeptical approach. Just to give you an idea, there is somebody out there who spoke at our Paradigm Symposium back in 2013. I had been in a debate with him. I've talked about him before. Dr. P.Z. Myers. He is an evolutionary biologist with the University of North Dakota. No, University of Minnesota, Moorhead, Minnesota, which is right next to really almost the same city as Fargo, and which is across the border. And he's a huge skeptic. He is a self-acclaimed crusader. He's a skeptical, atheistic crusader. He will go out of his way. He was the one that got Graham Hancock dropped from the TED Talks, things like that. And of course, people didn't like that, and so you know, PZ Myers. We had kind of we haven't talked for years. We were never buddies, never friends. I was in a debate with him, and we had a huge audience at a big event. We had about 400 people in this audience, all packed into this ballroom to watch PZ Myers tear apart the paranormalist. And so I didn't know it was a debate to begin with. So I wasn't prepared to debate anybody. I thought I was told I would be on a panel to talk about paranormal things. And so I get there, and then 2 minutes before it starts, I'm finding out it's a debate. I'm not prepared for a debate. I don't have any facts with me. I'm just going off the top of my head. So that's what I did that day, and I thought I held my own pretty well. Even though the audience was very stacked against anybody who was a paranormal believer. But so then PZ Myers, as a result of that, I was invited up to their suite, their party suite, and we had drinks and stuff. And I invited him to speak at the Paradigm Symposium. And he came, and this is all I'm getting at with all of that is to say, even this fellow came onto the stage at the Paradigm Symposium, and he spoke about aliens, and he spoke about a scientific approach, a skeptical approach to it. And he hates these paranormal people with a passion. But he was very polite, very generous, very gentlemanly almost from the stage. And he came on the stage, and some of our own audience started to boo him before he even said anything because of who he is and the people who knew who he was. And I said, ho, ho, I had the microphone. I said, hey, everybody. I said, let's not do that. Let's show respect for who he is, for his position, for what he's learned, what he's earned in life to get to the status he is. Let's hear him out. Let's hear what he has to say. I said, so don't boo him. I said, not yet. And they laughed. And so he talked, and there was a line he said, you know, he says about the whole alien thing. He says, don't think that an evolutionary biologist and scientists are against discovering aliens. He said, that's not what we're about. He says, we just want to back it with fact. And he said, if you can't back it with fact, I'm going to have a tough time with it. He says, the day that we find out if aliens really exist and have visited us, let's say we have a first contact, he said, you'll hear me, he said, being the most excited fellow in the universe. I'll be yelling it from the mountaintops that we've discovered contact with alien life. And so it's not that he was against it, it's that he wanted to corroborate it. He wanted to be something. So this is why I wanted to look at the more skeptical side of the paranormal, the more scientific side. Hey, Sarah. Which Sarah is here? I know like 30 Sarahs. I see Sarah. Sarah. Who's Sarah? Oh, Sarah Nichols. Sorry, Sarah. Whew, I already said hi to you. That's Sarah Nichols. Okay, that's Sarah. And so, when you start looking at this stuff, you want to make sure what was it that is the skeptic's credo? Think of Michael Shermer, who is the titular head of the skeptical movement out there. And he said, who has, by the way, had some paranormal experiences, which I've mentioned before. So he might not be as jaded as he once was about this. But he said, he made the quote, he said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I agree with that. And you should have to agree with that too. Really, an extraordinary claim should be backed by extraordinary evidence. Otherwise, it's just an anecdotal story or an anecdotal claim. Uh, let's see. Matthew says, well, people have been seeing unusual things in the sky, I heard. Pharaoh Tutmos III saw fiery rings in the sky and mentioned in the Thule papyrus. Yeah, that's all out there. That's interesting stuff, Matthew, by the way. And so you start looking at this stuff and you say, I I'm a believer, but I want to be skeptical. I've always said I'm a skeptical believer, meaning I have firsthand experience and I've seen things, I've experienced things. At the same time, I find it very hard to believe other people's stories unless I have some proof of them. I want to know. I hear people talk about their paranormal experience, and I'm like, yeah, like bullshit, and I'm like, most stories I hear, I throw in my what I affectionately call my bullshit can, which sits over here, and that bullshit can gets awfully full sometimes, and I don't want to hear somebody. It's like the psychics I would encounter at different events when I went to. They'd be half pickled because they're drinking at the bar, and they'd come up to you and they say, "I'm a psychic," and I'm like, "Okay, bullshit, Ken." So anyway, not that psychics can't drink a lot, but there you go. Doug Stack says, "I believe skeptically, skeptics on Skepter Day." There you go. And Beth Kirkham says, "Absolutely." I don't know if you're responding to me or somebody else. Um, Matthew Sainsbury says, "That's fair." And so I want to know things. How many times have I said that in talking about various topics on this show? I don't want to be told something. Let's take a topic like the Bible. I don't want to be told what to believe. I don't want to be told this is so. I don't want to be told that all of this happened the way it's written. I want to know. And if I don't have a way of knowing something, I find it very hard to do anything other than to separate myself from it. And it stays out here. Steve Clark says, Scotty, like an old 50s television turning itself on and off. I like the one did when I was a child. And those old 50 television sets, they're not like you bump a button on your phone and you've turned on your digital TV. Those old television sets that Steve's talking about, you had to go up and click. You had to turn that thing on. And so I know the kind of TV you're talking about. Remember, child of the 60s when I was a kid. And we had the big screen tubes that looked kind of greenish gray when they were off, and vacuum tubes and all of that. And I had a TV when I was a kid that had vacuum tubes in the back. So, all of that to say, I wanted to look at some things here about just something that kind of maybe borderlines on the scientific side. And I want to talk about the science of the paranormal for a few minutes. Can you trust? I'm asking you a question now. Listen closely. Answer this for yourself. Those of you who might believe in the paranormal things that are there, ghosts, boogeymen, whatever it might be. Um, that reminds me of an Indiana Jones line. We were just watching that over the weekend. We watched the 4 movies. And he says, you trying to scare me, Marcus? He says, it's not like the boogeyman or something. I don't remember the exact line, but the boogeyman. So can you trust your own mind when it comes to the paranormal? Ask yourself that question. Can you trust your own mind? And there is no live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Do you know that? That they dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills. By the way, this is, let me preface this. This is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, which she wrote in 1959, a year before I was born. So now that I've said that, I should have said that ahead of time. I'm reading this intro from her. Let me start that again. No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed to, by some, dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued height. Bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of the hill house, and whatever walked there walked alone. So that's Shirley Jackson. So on the paranormal, of all the paranormal phenomena that surrounds Halloween, ghost hunting, UFOs, Bigfoot, all the paranormal stuff, the haunted house may be seem to be the thing that inspires the most, if you will, cultural fear, especially in the West. Haunted houses. And witches, they haven't been scary since the days of Salem. Who's afraid of a witch? Who's afraid of the big bad witch, the big bad witch, the big bad witch? Who can tell me where that's from? Zombies, they're fun. It's fun to make up as zombies. It's great TV shows where you can, you gotta chop them in the head to kill them, but a bit campy. Vampires, they blame sparkly Robert Pattinson and others from the what was that series of books and movies, the Twilight movies and stuff, for taking the bite out of vampires. They sparkle and they can live in the daytime. But the haunted house can still send chills up the spine of the staunchest non-believer. You get somebody who says they don't believe in ghosts, and then ask them to come and walk through what is purported to be a haunted house. It will still give them the willies, so to speak. Was that the Wizard of Oz? Who's afraid of the big bad witch? No, that's not. That was something else. Tituba and Reverend Samuel Parris really stoked up paranoia back in the 1690s. Ain't that the truth? Deadly paranoia, as a matter of fact. How many people lost their lives there? 20 something? 19, I think it was. Because somebody claimed they were a witch. So, some of those things, they don't bother us as much anymore. But haunted houses, they can. You walk up to a house, even I do that. I'm jaded. And I'll walk up to a house that's supposed to be haunted, and I'm like, it's a cool looking building. And you get into some of those corners or a back hallway somewhere, or you get onto the floor. Hey, Scotty, why don't you go look upstairs for the. Okay. You go upstairs and you're like, you can almost feel it sometimes. So ghost stories tend to happen to the unsuspecting. And so who's to say that they might not happen to you? They also are passed around the world by word of mouth. And often they seemingly trustworthy sources. My grandma said, my grandma grew up across the street from this house, but nowadays the internet expands this oral tradition to almost anyone who listens. Witness all kinds of websites out there that talk about ghost stories. One of my favorites is, if you've never listened to him, Jim Harold, who does his paranormal ghost show, his paranormal campfire. things like he's been around for 20 years doing radio. I don't know the exact number of years, but you should go check him out, Jim Harold, and he's fantastic with his ghost stuff. Science, of course, counsels us to be skeptical, doesn't it? We have to have a certain skepticism toward the idea of spirits and spooks. And so, if real ghosts aren't to blame for the things that go bump in the night, what might be responsible for those things? So, researchers have investigated all kinds of culprits like electromagnetic fields, infrasound, below the range of human hearing. The ultimate source of hauntings may just be that a 3-pound organ between the ears, the brain, is creating it for you. Now, I don't know what you think of that. Maybe you're going to go, oh, I thought you were going to actually talk about real ghosts and how we explain them and stuff. Quantum physics, says Beth Kirkham. Yes. Um, what else we got in here? Thanks, Scotty. I'm going to dream about that song now. That's not in your head anymore, is it, Beth? Who's afraid of the big bad witch? The big bad witch? The big bad witch? I think that came from, I want to say, what I get a visual of in my head is like characters that would be associated with the old Casper the Friendly Ghost cartoon from, I'm talking way back. I don't know when that started, 50s to the 60s, somewhere in there. And I get these characters, I get like the little red dressed witch little girl, cute little girl witch or something. I don't know if that's right though. I don't know where that's came from. That's in my head. Robert Stack isn't dead. He just went back to his home planet. Well, there you go. And according to today's TV scientists, you should just accept the narrative and stop critical thinking because it's dangerous. How about that? Ain't that the truth, Matt? How's that for a little sideways politics slid into the story here tonight? I agree with you, by the way. So, seeking ghosts in sound. Remember when we were talking about Enoch, we talked about resonance, the resonance of the sound that's uttered and made. And you can seek ghosts in sound. And one plausible explanation for a haunted house is that people are responding to something in the environment. Now, mind you, as I'm going to go through this, you're going to hear some skepticism. That doesn't mean, okay, let's put the caveat in here. I'm not saying ghosts don't exist. I'm just saying here is a skeptical scientific approach to them. A plausible explanation is that there's something in the environment, but that something is far more mundane than you might think and far more mundane than actual restless ghosts or spirits. And a possible culprit is infrasound, or sounds just below the typical human hearing threshold of 20 hertz. In 1998, Vic Tandy, who was a researcher at the Coventry University in England, joined with his fellow Coventry professor, Tony Lawrence, to write a paper based on Tandy's own spooky experiences at a medical equipment manufacturing shop. And on occasion, employees there reported these spooky sensations and the feeling of a presence in the room. Tandy dismissed all of this stuff until one night when he began to feel cold and gloomy. After checking that none of the medical gas bottles were leaking, he sat back at his desk, only to see a gray figure emerge from the corner of his vision. And when he summoned the courage to look at the apparition directly, it faded away. Of course, that's the way it always is. Have you been there? Have you seen things and gone, you're kind of looking out of the corner of your eye and you go, and you look and it's gone. Whatever moved, whatever movement was being made, whatever thing was happening over there, it's now gone. Beth says she sees those all the time. Beth, you and my wife should just share. Hello, I speak English. Can share stories. My wife sees things all the time. My son Flynn, when he was 2 years old, 3 years old, would be afraid to sleep on his own because in his bedroom he said he saw gray, what he called gray floating fish in the room in the dark. Now, what that was, I have no idea. And but that was the way he described it. My daughters, even now, the Rowan, I think, sometimes deliberately pulls my leg. She gave me her. Remember, I had her on the radio show about a year ago. She was giving me her red ghost story, the woman in the red dress ghost story. And I brought her on air. I don't know what day it was, maybe a Sunday, maybe a regular show. And she told her little story of the night before, having seen a ghost of a woman wearing a red dress in the hallway upstairs by the bedrooms. And now, I don't know. Sometimes I think she pulls my leg. She watches, she gets on YouTube, even though she's forbidden to get on YouTube without permission. There's certain shows we don't let her watch, stupid shows. These dumb teenagers and college kids that are pulling pranks on each other and pulling paranormal pranks and trying to pass it off as real. And, if I get 3,000 likes on this today, we'll do another one tomorrow. And, these guys are making millions of dollars on their YouTube pages. You know the kind of people I'm talking about. And so I think she watches those sometimes and she wants to do her own thing. And but she's a great storyteller, I'll tell you that. So I don't know if she's actually seen those things or not. Doug Stacks says, Matt Finn, I had my life literally flash before my eyes, and my wife's aunt that had just passed away and was there to protect me. So you saw your wife's aunt who had passed, huh? Steve says, let them come to my house when the ghosts are cooking breakfast on a wood burning stove, and there no one is in the house or even close to able to the US. Hey, Steve, is that a real story? You're saying you get ghosts that will what do you get? Do you get the aromas? Do you see the fire burning? Wood stove? That's very interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. The life after projects, NDEs, are very compelling, Doug. Pretty amazing research. Is Doug a skeptic? Doug, are you a skeptic? Are people trying to convince you of stuff here? Are you a non-believer? Are you a non-believer, Doug? Let's see. What's Doug saying? Mick Freezer. Okay, blah blah blah. What did she have to say? I don't call them ghosts. I call them entities, says Morgan Snow. Yeah. Frankly, we don't know what ghosts are. That's a label we put on something. And ghosts, spirits, interdimensional entities. Morgan said entities. So yeah, it's sometimes hard to define what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. So let's move on here. There are so he talked about this guy who was doing this study talked about seeing a ghost, and a subsequent experience while cutting metal led Tandy to wonder if there was sound energy being caused that caused his and his colleagues inexplicable experiences. And after a particular fan in the building was switched off, the ghosts disappeared. And so the researchers wrote in 1998 in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research. And they said they were talking about proving this notion has been much more difficult. Lots of things create infrasound, from gusts of wind, air conditioners, to earthquakes. And in one experiment, researchers used hidden infrasound generators during ghost tours given at a Mary King's Close in Edinburgh. If you remember that, seen some pretty good shows done on that. Ghost Adventures did a good show on that a few years ago. Mary King's Close in Edinburgh. Edinburgh. And the close is now underground. But in the 1600s, it was a series of narrow alleyways and passages through all these tall buildings. And local legend tells of plague victims bricked into the walls. And during a city ghost festival in 2007, there were some unsuspecting tour groups who were blasted with infrasound as they roamed these creepy passageways. And the results revealed no difference in the number of people who reported a paranormal experience, whether they'd been exposed to infrasound or ambient noise. However, the infrasound exposed groups did report a greater overall number of spooky experiences, with more people reporting multiple such experiences. So, infrasound groups reported feeling the temperature rise during the tours, compared with only 5% of the ambient noise group, and the researchers reported in their preliminary results. Now, it was hardly a ringing endorsement of the notion that ghosts and ghouls are simply sounds before the threshold of the human ear, below the threshold of the human ear. And after all, people in haunted houses usually report what? Cold spots, bumps in the night, not feelings of excessive warmth. And it's not clear why infrasound would lead to increase in spooky experiences per person, but not more people reporting spooky experiences. So it's interesting how that works. Uh, Another natural explanation for ghosts. Now, we're going through scientifically and trying to parse this down. Another natural explanation for ghosts might be electromagnetic energy. Spirits may not surround us, but electromagnetic fields generated by power lines, electronic devices certainly do. And could electronics be giving us ghostly vibes? That's a good question. We have lots of electronics around us nowadays. So, a few small experiments suggest electromagnetic fields might have this effect on people. And in 2000, cognitive neuroscientist Michael Persinger of Laurentian, I can't even say that, Laurentian University in Canada, and his colleagues, they used these magnet fields to stimulate the brain of a 45-year-old man who had reported previous ghostly experiences. And they managed with the magnetic fields to conjure up an apparition similar to what the man had seen years before, and along with a corresponding rush of fear. And the researchers reported in the journal Perceptual and Motor Skills. It was the journal. Now, the next year, in the same journal, Persinger and his colleagues reported on the strange case of a teenage girl who said that she'd been impregnated by the Holy Spirit and felt the invisible presence of a baby on her left shoulder. Okay, there you go. I've, Father, I've been impregnated by the Holy Spirit. The baby's right here, sitting on my shoulder in ghostly form. Well, that was her claim. That sounds a little nutty to me. But um, so she made this claim, and the girl had experienced a brain injury earlier in her life. And the researchers wrote, but the trauma wasn't the sole reason for the religious visitation. Next to the girl's bed was an electric clock that generated magnetic pulses similar to those used in to trigger seizures in epileptic rats. And so once the clock was removed, the feelings of a presence vanished. She no longer had a baby sitting on her shoulder. And Persinger and his colleagues argue that some people are particularly prone to disruption of temporal lobes, which happen to be where the brain synthesizes information. The only problem I find with that, folks, is that you start using that as an explanation. Well, you would have to have somebody who then has this, what would you call it? A handicap of some kind, or will, with the frontal lobes, and that they're picking this. And so the only people who see ghosts are people with frontal lobe problems. A little loss of signal between brain and fingers, maybe. And so, as Matt Finn just said, so patients undergoing brain surgery reveal how important the temporal lobes can be to the experience of reality. And this is something Christopher French, a psychologist at Goldsmiths College of the University of London, said. And he researches the roots of paranormal experiences. And when surgeons stimulate the part of the brain where the temporal and partial lobes meet, the temporoparietal junction, temporoparietal, all the vowels, all the syllables. The I thought I had it licked. Temporoparietal, temporoparietal, temporal parietal, temporoparietal. Boom, junction. Tempoparietal junction can actually switch out of body experiences on and off for a person. That's very interesting. Have any of you ever had an out of body experience? Have you ever flown or floated um, in an out of body experience? Yeah, big word, but way too big. They did a lot of lobotomies in the 1900s, though. I would say the early 1960s to mental health patients. Yes, they did, Doug Stack. The mental matrix is almost impossible for most to escape, says Matt, and I agree with you. And I've had an OBE. Have you, Doug? Tell us about it in the chat room. I want to hear about it. Now, I've never had an OBE. I've never had anything like that that I know of. I seem to be a pretty grounded, and I don't mean, like mentally or psychologically. I'm just more grounded when it comes to that stuff. I'm like, I don't attract ghosts or spirits. It's never been my thing. It's never been something that I have no idea how. Oh, somebody's having an argument out there. I don't know if you can hear that. So, um, all of that to say, that's always distracting. So, there's some people out there. There were some contractors here and stuff out in the front, and there's a little argument going on. So, um, let's see. I'm trying to regain my composure from where I was. Sorry about that, being distracted like that. But have you ever had that kind of an experience? Have you ever had that kind of thing where you are um, an experience where you're out of body, or you have left your body, or you've had those what's the not OBE, but the have any of you ever had what's that long distance where you can see psychically? Why am I missing the word on that? Not OBE. Somebody throw it into me. NDE. No, not an NDE. It's that idea that you can go out of body and go places and see things of your cognitive astral projection. There it is, Steph. Thank you very much. The astral projection. And so astral projection um, needs to be, or is something that, have any of you experienced that? Is that a real thing? Yeah, I've met people who have done that. I met a fellow, and I mentioned him on the show once before. He was a friend of my mom's that said he was part of being not drafted, but uh, um, um, recruited for the CIA to work in a astral projection project. And he eventually dropped out of it, but he was giving me all kinds of things about it that were very difficult. And so, hey, folks, I hate to do this. Let's take a little break. I got to step out there for a second. So I don't know if I can mute my mic on here, but I can. Give me a second. I got to step away. Treat it like a commercial break. I'll be right back. All right, folks. Sorry about that. I had to go take care of a little something going on out there, and so pardon the commercial, silent commercial break. But I felt um, I had to go out and interject something. So Beth Kirkham says I took part in past live mediation classes or meditation classes. I had the most realistic dream after one of them. I've not had one like it since. That's something too. That the whole past life thing. Now I'm rabbit trailing us off a bit of where I left off before I stepped out, but that rabbit trails me in a good way because that's something I'd like to talk about sometimes. Is this whole past life issue? Oh, sorry. I'm in a camper here. Guys, we're not driving, but everything moves. The bouncing. You see, look at that. I can touch the table and you got to bounce here. So it's just the way it is. Uh, yeah. Steve Clark's right. It's the fifth wheel I'm in. It's a huge, massive RV camper. And I'm in the garage portion of it. That's where my temporary digs are. But Scott Allen, that's what we got going on here sometimes. If somebody walks heavy on that side of the trailer or the camper, the whole thing will shake. So that's what you're seeing. Don't get sick. Take some Dramamine before you come in here. But that's something I have questions about. Is the whole the whole past life thing. Are we able to see past lives? What are we seeing when we see those? What are these little kids? And I'll use just the very typical example that we've been hearing a lot of lately. But these little kids who suddenly have memories of World War II and are speaking French, and they're 4 years old or 5 years old, and they remember details about somebody who's crashed and died, or even further back, much further back, some of them. And I hear those kinds of stories. You go, what the hell? Where is that coming from? Is that something that is outside the realm of something that's explainable? Is it scientific? Is there a scientific response to that? Science might want to try to. Yeah, see, I'm moving too much, and the whole thing's shaking. Can science explain those things? Is it past lives? What kind of energy is there that causes that to happen, or causes to see that somebody's walking very heavily across the trailer or something, and the whole trailer's shaking right now. So Doug Stack says I've seen two shadow people in my life. Took the heads of my ex. What? I was once told that I was a king in a past life that took the heads of my ex-lovers. Whoa, Doug. So in other words, nobody date Doug. Don't know what's going to happen. Um, and so Doug, I'm a natural leader. Very nice. He was about five, Beth said, that happened to your brother. See, that's always intriguing to me. Matt said, I've always felt I spent time at sea in past lives. As you've all heard me talk about in the past, I've always wondered about that because I had repetitive dreams of being in military in different eras of time. There had to be five, six, or seven of those dreams I had a long time ago. I haven't had them in a long time. But I will sit sometimes and I will watch a movie or something that has to do with some other period of history and going to war in the military, and it grips me in ways it doesn't grip other people. So I've wondered about that and how to decipher that. It's like you'll never really know because it seems so subjective to try to pull the scientific side of that out. How do you learn? How do you find out? Is there any way to qualify or quantify experiences like that? Other than that, like Beth was saying, like her little brother at five, those some of those experiences are so strange, so weird, so out of the ordinary that they are very difficult to explain. And of course, because we want to be scientific and understand things, we always have to try to explain things. So, anyway, I was talking about French's work, cause of hauntings, sound, infrasound, electromagnetic. Your own lying eyes is another thing. Sometimes we see things that don't really exist, or we that pareidolia. We've all heard of that. It's where you see patterns in still photographs, or it's like looking at patterns in flowery wallpaper, and all of a sudden you see 20 different kinds of faces looking at you because the mind fills in gaps. And so it's brain processing, is what it is. And so the psychic problem isn't the only evidence that suggests people overestimate their own trustworthiness. And sometimes we do that. We overestimate how trustworthy we are ourselves. If you've got one very confident but actually inaccurate witness to something, it can influence the memory of other witnesses. And so you have to wonder, you have to ask, how trustworthy is the story being told? It's like when we got criticism. Now, you may or may not like shows like Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures and so on. When I worked with the Ghost Hunters, there was all that criticism about certain things, and they'd have their skeptics and their critics out there every show trying to pull apart everything they did. It's just part of the game when you're doing it publicly like that. And I asked Grant Wilson, who was pretty close to me, and I was pretty close to him. I asked him, I said, come on, level with me. I said, is there anything to level with me about? Do you guys ever pull stuff, and the production team on the show? Do they make you do some things, and so on and so on and so on? And he said, Scotty, I'm going to tell you the truth. He says, there's never been anything we've ever faked. He says, I've never faked anything. And he says, I'm telling you that from my heart. And I believed him. And so I used to use the argument, if you don't trust what you're seeing on the television show, or you don't trust what the story is you've been told, go and look to the credibility of the individual who told that story or who did that thing. And said I find Grant Wilson to be a very credible individual. He's an honest man. He loves his wife and his family. He's not somebody who's out there to do cheap thrills for TV for money. Um, and so I saw that in him, and I said, it's the credibility of the person that counts for me. And so there you go. That's on that particular. And so studies find that people with paranormal beliefs tend to have particularly rich imaginations and are inclined to become easily engrossed in tasks. They're also more prone than average to false memories. Now, I'm a very creative person. Do I have false memories? I don't think so. Um, are my paranormal beliefs predicated on the fact that I have a creative mind and can make shit up? No, I don't think so. I try to be very fair in my evaluations and very fair with myself to figure out, what am I doing? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? I want to know things. I don't want to present false information. I don't want to uh, uh, um, I don't need to have the experience be so real that I will make it up. I want to know what's real. I want to know what's really there. So when they're imagining something, these creative people, um, it's much like the real thing. And maybe more so, it would be to the likes of me, they're more likely to make a false memory. People have a tendency to do that. People prone to false memories might say that they remember clearly where they were and who they were with, and when they saw a video of the Bali nightclub bombing in 2002. Remember those tapes? But that bombing wasn't captured on video. So you couldn't remember those tapes, could you? Because there was nothing on video. But people said they remember the videos. And so is this a false memory? Is that the same thing as seeing a ghost? Maybe not. It's an example used by these researchers. So, in other words, the possible explanation for spooks, and spirits and ghosts might be scarier than actual ghosts. It might be something with electronics, with the atmosphere, with your brain. You can't even trust your own mind sometimes. And so I want to look at that and say, now, does that prove to me that most ghost stories are fake because there are people who have creative imaginations or are subject to ultrasound, are subject to um, all these different kind of electrics and magnetics and all of this stuff? No, I don't think that that accounts for everybody who has ghost experiences. I think that might account for some. Um, Steve said, somebody saying, that's cool, Steve. I want to see what Steve said. We found when an elderly woman started talking to him. Oh, see, I missed part of that. First part of that. She said, there's a YouTube channel that covers stuff of children talking about past lives. Um, Steve Clark says, we found when an elderly woman started talking to him in a store in West Virginia, she said he was speaking what she said was Old German. That's very interesting, Steve. Doug says Grant's a good guy and he made me mad all the time trying to debunk things. You know, that's what they did. That's what those shows basically were. I see him now in his new version. I've only seen a couple of episodes in the new, since they split up and they're doing their own shows now. I've only seen a couple of shows of Grant's show. His is Ghost Hunters. He owns the name, I guess. And Jason's is Ghost Nation or something like that. And Ghost Hunters, Grant always seems very concerned about what the people who are having their experiences are experiencing. He wants to genuinely help them get through whatever the problem might be that's causing the haunting. So there are perhaps scientific explanations for things, but you can't take, like in politics and other aspects of life, romance, these things, you can't take one explanation that is covers everything. That's the answer all, the end all and be all. And so that is something the same with the scientific answers. Doesn't answer everything. Steve says piano playing by itself, and it wasn't the type that plays by itself. I wasn't the only one that it happened to. I've heard some things like that before. Steve, um, Doug Stack says I remember her say, "Damn it, Billy, I've done this for 4 years without you. I have to help take care of the kids." I laughed. She said, "Why aren't you laughing?" Okay, I missed the first part of that, I'm sure. Your grandmother started arguing with your dead grandfather. There it is. While I was sitting there, just me and her, and that happened. It's like the story I tell of contacting my aunt who had died. This would have been, my daughter was 16, Bryn, one of my twin daughters, and they're 29 now. So this is 13 years ago. We're sitting out at the ranch house, and you've heard this story before. We were sitting out at the ranch house. We were the only ones at the house. It was nighttime, about 10:30 at night, and I pulled out the spirit box and I ran it through my computer speakers. So we're hearing it very, very clearly and loud in the house. Now, the spirit box, the thing about them is there's no broadcasting element to it. You can't broadcast out to somewhere and somebody picks that signal up and starts hoaxing you, answering your questions and so on. There's no way to pick up that signal. And yet, here we are out in the middle of the country on the ranch, farmland all around us, and we start picking up a voice. That was my aunt's voice. Didn't sound like her, said it was my aunt's voice. And she gave her name, and we were asking questions. She was answering questions. This is the incident where she started asking about my mom. Now, somebody might say somebody's hoaxing you and broadcasting, but who knew we were going to be sitting there at 10:30 at night doing this? Nobody. Who was monitoring the house? Who has microphones in our house picking up what we're talking about so they can fake us? Nobody. So we started getting this information. This is Andy. She said, this is Andy. I said, my Aunt Andy? Yes. Immediate. I mean, it was immediate. Just bang. Almost right on top of what I was saying. I said, my mom's sister? Yes. And and she actually asked at one point, she said, where's Janie? That's my mom. And I said, you mean Jenny? Jenny, your sister, my mom? Yes. And I said, well, she's in Arizona. Oh, that's right. The voice came back and said. And I'd asked other questions and we talked back and forth. It wasn't conversational, like pure conversation, but I was getting responses to direct questions. I had it asking me questions. Now, you can listen to that story and throw it in your bullshit can because you weren't there. You didn't hear it happen. You would have to trust my credibility on a story like that to be able to relay that to you. My daughter was there. She would talk about that story. She asked some questions. Uh, do you remember me? Oh, she said to the voice, now my daughters were 3 when my aunt passed away. My aunt was only 10 years older than I am. I'm sorry, older than I am. And she passed away rather suddenly. There had been some drug use. She was hooked on street grade meth. She was an alcoholic. And one day she called me because she wasn't feeling good. My feet are swelling up. I'm going to go to the hospital. 2 days she was dead. And so she passed away in 1995. I was 35. She would have been 45 years old when she passed away. And so 13 years ago, I was what? I was 47. So she would have been 57 if she had lived. I was 47 is when we had this conversation. And so, very interesting. My daughter said to her, my daughters were at her funeral with me, and they said, Bryn said, do you remember who I am? And the voice came back and said, I see you there. You're pretty now. And what do you do when you hear that? Who is saying that? Who's giving you that information? Did Bryn and I have a collective electromagnetic mirage? No. Did we need to make shit up out of our own heads? No, not collectively. We were just sitting there. We weren't smoking pot. We weren't drinking. My 16-year-old daughter. It was just, we happened to be at the house alone that night. Or Abby might have been in bed already, I think. Maybe. The other two might have been in bed. But so I don't remember. I just remember Bryn and I being there. And we were going to experiment a little bit. And so that's what we got. And so what do you do with that information when you get it? Who was that? Was that really my aunt? Now it's very interesting. Not long after that, we had a television station in southern Minnesota, a small town television station, small city, that got a hold of our names and wanted to interview us, talk about our ghost stuff. And they actually came out to the ranch and we talked, and so they had their cameraman there and the young, attractive, news reporter doing the story. And so we're sitting there, and I said, I think Rainey was there with us too. And I said, I can show you the experiment I did with my daughter. I was telling her about that very same story. And the reporter was sitting there, and while that spirit box is going over the speakers, she gets voices talking. And it was the same goddamn voice. I swear to you, folks. There was it almost sounded like somebody speaking in falsetto. Like you talk like that, and it's a falsetto. It had that kind of tone. It's like, you know, it's Andy, you're on. And it had that tone to it. It sounded weird. And that same voice during the daylight now when they're there, they're interviewing us and they're filming, and they came and filmed us at an old church in the small town with the old steeple and stuff going up into this ancient old church there. And then they came back and interviewed us, and the anchor girl, anchor woman, got pretty shaken by that. She heard a voice come through. I don't remember what was said. I said, "Hi, whoever was my aunt was talking to me the other night. If you're here, would you talk for this young lady? Say hello." I said, "It's not a parlor trick. I'm not doing it like a trick dog. I'm going to throw the bone and you catch it." I said, "But if you're here and you'd like to say something," I said, "it'd be really cool if you could talk to her." And the voice said, "Hello," just like that. The young anchor woman about jumped out of her skin. She was like, "Oh my God." And when they did the news story and played it, she played those segments. We got a couple of segments of the voices. She played those on the news segment. Hold on. Sorry. Woo! And she was completely mystified by it. She'd never experienced anything like that before. And so that's the thing I'm asking is when you have experiences like that, what are you experiencing? To me, you're experiencing an entity, as Morgan said, a spirit, maybe a ghost. I don't know. I still don't know if that was my aunt. Thank you, Matthew. But it was somebody who claimed they were my aunt. And that's less interesting to me than the fact that there was even a voice that was talking to me. Gettysburg is a special place, Matt. We had those experiences in Gettysburg at the uh, what was the house? Um, oh no, I can't think of the house. The brick bed and breakfast museum type place. It's right downtown there, and with bullet holes in the walls. And I've seen ghost articles done on television or documentaries where they showed this window where snipers had been killed that were shooting on the Confederate soldiers, or was it the Union soldiers? And there were Confederates that died in the house. Farnsworth House. Farnsworth House. And that's where we got those wild EVPs with if you remember the late Debbie Constantino, Debbie and Mark Constantino, they were friends of mine, and uh, you heard about that story where they were. Mark got jealous and killed her and killed himself 5 6 years ago, and but they were there, and this is back in 2010, I want to say. And I was there with Amy Bruni from Ghost Hunters, and um, uh, I can't remember if Jason and Grant were there or not. Not in this particular ghost hunt, but they may have. They spoke at the event, I think. Huh, boy, my memory's bad on that part. But see, now I don't have a tainted memory about the story, though. You know why? I've told it 100 times since it happened, and I don't omit the details or embellish them. But we got those weird EVPs and stuff. And where does that come from? That's not electromagnetic energy. So Doug says, Matt, we could be bleeding into a world 100 years ahead of us, and we could be the ghosts. Just think, it may be possible. I mentioned this recently on some topic. Just it's like that old print from like 14th or 15th century Germany. What looks like a World War I dogfight going on in the skies, a lithograph or something, or a wood print. Go look that up. It's German or something like that. And the theory came out that perhaps that is time bleeds, time overlaps. You can find it. Go look it up. Steve says, I'd love to share some stuff with others of my experiences, but I'm afraid people would think that I'm crazy. That's all right. We're all crazy, Steve. Once I get up and running to bring on guests, I'm going to invite you to come on, Steve, and tell some of your stories. The not too distant future. So I think it'd be interesting to hear your stories. Yes, 1566 in a documentary, says Matthew Sainsbury. Beth says, "Oh my God, Doug, there's a movie based on just that." Yeah, that's interesting stuff. Do you think it happens? Remember Jason and Grant at the Washington, is it the Washington Hotel in Rhode Island? Not Rhode Island, Delaware, wherever it is, New Hampshire, something like that. So, where they contacted, it would seem they were having ongoing conversations with some princess who used to live there off and on at this hotel when they'd come and stay. And she was asking, "Who are you?" She was asking them, "Who am I talking to? Who's talking to me?" Questions like that. It was very interesting. I have to look that up with old ghost hunters shows from a long time ago, 10 years ago, maybe even, about the princess or the duchess or whatever she was. And that seemed to be this big new thing in television ghost hunting, was the fact that they had stumbled on somebody that talked to them, asked them questions. And the theories started abounding. Were Jason and Grant the ghosts to her? Was she hearing their voices the way they heard hers? Was there a time slippage there? Overlap? That's interesting stuff. Um, Steve told Teresa Anton and her friends on another of her shows. Doug Steck says, "What about me, Scotty? I can't tell my tales." Sure, Doug, you can tell your tales. We'll get one of these days. We'll do a Zoom forum where everybody can come on the show, and we'll talk about all our ghost stories. So maybe we'll have some of you submit the way you did not submit your what you would do if you wanted to be if you suddenly became a multimillionaire. I said submit those to my email, and I didn't get anyone submit one. But you were also talking about it. If you guys want me to read some of your ghost stories on the air, send them to me. Send them to my email address, Scott Allen Roberts, just like my website, at gmail.com. Scott Allen Roberts at gmail.com. I'll never submit, bruh, says Master Finn. I don't email nobody. I don't email nobody. Capiche, says Doug Stack. Doug Staccolini. Yeah, I don't email people. That's just not my thing. So Matt Finn knows that's a lie, he says. Well, there you go, folks. I think there's so many places to go with this, so much speculation to do. I want to talk some more about these things. We're going to talk about these things most of the week. I want to do some paranormal stuff here. So let's leave it at that for tonight. It's 10:14. We'll be out of here by 10:15. So I want to thank you for being here. Come on back tomorrow night, and we'll talk about some very similar things. Also, go check out my Etsy page, etsy.com/shop/son of a patriot. And you can check out, of course, my my scottallenroberts.com site. See all the stuff I do. And that's it. So that's all I got. Paranormal is a great show topic every day. Yes, it is. As long as you can keep it fresh and keep it exciting. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Matthew Sainsbury. Thank you, Beth Kirkham and Matt Finn and everybody who was here tonight. Doug Stack, Steve Clark, everybody who was here. So there we go. All right, guys. Signing off. I will catch you here tomorrow night, same time. In the meantime, live long and prosper.